this is going to be a little update on what the situation is right now. As far as looking at the country nationwide, we're not the only ones being impacted by the drought. Texas, Oklahoma, but also in California, where extreme and exceptional drought conditions are taking place. Taking a closer look at Texas, you can see all of the Texas Panhandle is what is called a D4 exceptional drought. Now, the chances of getting this type of drought are once in every 50 years. So this is a very significant drought. Unfortunately, this area has one part of a county or not in this D4 drought over the last 4 years almost. Looking at the current percentage for the state of Texas, 25% of Texas is in this exceptional D4 drought. Looking at Oklahoma, almost the entire Oklahoma Panhandle is in this D4 exceptional drought, as well as western portions of Oklahoma. Now, the current Texas reservoir situation in the Texas Panhandle is pretty dire, to say the least. Lake Greenbelt is at 13.2%. Paladora Reservoir is 3%. And then you see Lake Meredith at 0%. Now, this is a loop of Lake Meredith satellite view. And this is from 1984 through 2012. And you're going to be able to see how the lake essentially shrinks. And during this time frame from about now on till it stops, we have experienced pretty significant drought conditions from about 2000 to the present. And you can see we're going to loop that again. All right. So the current soil moisture right now for Texas and Oklahoma, most areas are less than 5% what their normal soil moisture should be in middle May. In fact, most locations in and around Amarillo, the southern Texas Panhandle, are 2%. As far as the current yearly rainfall deficit, I know this is very difficult to see, but you look at all the red. The areas that are in red, here's Amarillo, Dumas, Dalhart. These areas, all for current yearly rainfall, have gotten less than 25% of what we're supposed to see so far this year. In fact, there are many locations that are less than 5%, especially across the southwestern Texas Panhandle. So this is the driest 43-month period that we have ever experienced in Amarillo. This is where we are currently, and you can see the greens dropped off less than 40 inches of rain that we have experienced the last 43 months. Here are the 1950s, and there's the Dust Bowl. So you can see by this graph, we are drier right now than we ever were in the early 1950s and what we were in the Dust Bowl. Now, taking a look at this plot, and this is, you want to follow the solid blue line. This is another way of looking at this. This is for Amarillo, driest 43 months. We are 4 inches below the second driest time frame. So we're not only the driest, we are 4 inches below the driest. Our normal is 70 inches, what we're supposed to see in 43-month period, and we've had 39. Now, taking a look at Dalhart, which is even more extreme. Dalhart is 11 inches below the second driest time frame they've ever experienced. And they're sitting at just over 20 inches. Normal is close to 60 inches. So they're almost 38 inches below normal than what they're supposed to see in 3.5 years. So I'm going to pass this off to Nick Fenner. He's going to talk about the impacts.
Thank you, Chrissy. We're going to start taking a look at some of the impacts that this drought has had over the last couple of years, and take a look first at how it's impacted agriculture, one of the most important industries around the panhandles, and highlighting it's been about 4 years now since we've really been able to have a successful dryland winter wheat crop. In many portions, especially in the western panhandles, it's failed, and there's already been insurance adjusters out zeroing crops there. We've seen an increased demand for water in irrigation out there in the fields. Many producers are having to run their irrigation systems 24/7 just to keep crops alive. And we've seen also a transition from crops that are water intensive to ones that are less intensive, say switching from corn to more cotton and sorghum across the area. Now, we did see some timely rains throughout 2012 and 2013, which helped to minimize some of those impacts on crops. And at the bottom here, you can see there's some crop production figures from 2013. About 60% of normal production for wheat and 75% of normal for sorghum, and corn, since it's all irrigated, was about normal. Looking at the value of the production over the last 4 years, the price returned to the farmers around the area actually stayed about steady from 2010 to 2013, with values around $1.4 billion. But crop prices nearly doubled on all commodities around the area between 2010 and 2012. So if you do the math on that, we've actually seen that the only thing that saved area farmers was that increase in prices, because crop production is about 50% of what it was back in 2010. And then looking at the impacts to beef cattle across the area, of course, with the decreased rainfall, we've seen a lot of loss of native grasses and very limited regrowth even after some of the rainy periods. So there's been a need for supplemental feeding for cattle across the area and all the costs that that brings. And the cattle inventory from pre-drought is about 50% across the panhandles. It varies from county to county, anywhere about 30 to 50%. And those cattle have either been sold off or sent off to greener pastures in places like Kansas or Nebraska or the Dakotas until the drought's over and those ranchers can bring back their stock. Also, one of the other impacts we've seen over the last couple of years are some wildfires in the native grasses out here in the panhandles, with a lot of activity in 2011 following the exceptional rainfall that we saw in 2010. A lot of grass growth, which dried out quickly, and it led to a lot of fires. And that timely rainfall that we saw in 2012 and 2013 helped to ease some of the impacts. We didn't see as much in the way of fires. But again, this year we did see an uptick in some fires, especially off the Cap Rock in the eastern parts of the panhandles. But we found that the prolonged period of drought has limited fuels in the western parts of the panhandles due to limited grass growth. Now, for some of the better news, here's a rainfall map that we see from the last 24 hours. Have seen rainfall amounts anywhere from about 1/4 of an inch up to about 4 inches south and east of Claude yesterday. And we're expecting this rainy pattern to continue for the next couple of days with some continued short-term drought relief. Again, anywhere from about another inch to 4 inches possible, with the best rainfall falling in the southeastern parts of the panhandles and down into southwest Oklahoma and northwest Texas. Looking at the next couple of months, we could see some of this continued short-term relief from the drought conditions, but we do expect that patterns will be set up for continued or intensifying drought across the region. And then finally, looking out a few more months into the future, we do expect an El Nino to develop across the eastern parts of the Pacific. And what we'll see, about a 70% chance for that to form by the later months. You can see there September, October, November, December, those seasons, we see about a 70% chance. Taking another look at it, probably the best news is none of the models that we have to look at for possible El Nino or La Nina conditions suggest La Nina over the coming months, with most models putting us somewhere comfortably in the range of an El Nino. And with that, we'll see an increased chance for rainfall and snow through the fall and into next spring time periods. Finally, just to wrap up here, to bring home, we have here shown how much rainfall we'd need to see in about the next 6 months to fully eliminate drought conditions. And for portions of the West Texas through the Panhandles and up into the Central Plains, we'd need about 18 to 30 inches during that time period. That's about 1 to 2 years of normal rainfall that we would need in the next 6 months to fully ease those drought conditions. So to wrap up, all of the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles are currently experiencing D4 exceptional drought conditions, the worst according to the U.S. Drought Monitor. This is the 4th year of those conditions persisting in parts of the panhandles. The regional drought began back in October of 2010, and that puts our current rainfall totals below those of the 1930s Dust Bowl drought and 1950s droughts. Short-term relief can be seen at times over the coming months, but we do expect those long-term impacts and drought to persist for some time. That being said, if you have any further questions, feel free to give us a call here at the Weather Service, as well as follow along with the stories on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, or check out our website